Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. So this time around, it's going to be a bit of a double cast, but a little different than what we usually do. The first match, pre-patch, second match will be post-patch. And it's a bit of a celebration of Empire Infantry because that is honestly something that usually gets overlooked, and I'm really hyped for the changes to Empire Infantry. They're the ones who are really getting a whole bunch of improvements with this upcoming patch. Uh, and so I figured, just a before and after contrast. Obviously, it's not going to be like the exact same composition or anything, but I just want to do a little bit of before and after contrast, what you could do with infantry in the first before it, and what you can do afterwards. So this first cast, actually, I'm casting it before the patch hits because I don't want to have any errors in my replays, which might be caused by the patch. That sometimes happens. They sometimes break replays, so I want to have it cast early. So regardless, let's hop right in, guys, and discuss what we've got here. So obviously, for our Lord, we did bring, and this is an all-infantry army, no cavalry whatsoever, except I guess my Lord and hero here, but and an artillery piece. But otherwise, all infantry. For our Lord, we are bringing Volkmar the Grim, looking very stern, very menacing, on his Volkswagen here, with his, you can see his fancy Jade Griffin there. He's nothing too fancy as far as combat's concerned. He's except armor and HP pool, which regens, which is amazing. His melee stats are honestly trash. He does do impact damage. He's a chariot, so he can kind of roll through enemy infantry, but his melee attack, his weapon strength, even his charge bonus is pretty pitiful. His melee defense is a total joke, so he's really not very good there. He does have good resistances, though. He does have fear. He does have terror. He does, of course, have unbreakable, which is crazy. And he actually has some cool abilities I'm bringing here to make this all infantry army or infantry heavy army work. He's got Grand Hammer of Sigmar, first and foremost. Of course, we do have the Jade Griffin there. But the Grand Hammer of Sigmar, which provides a plus 26 melee attack boost. With the patch, this is a similar effect is going to be applied from the normal Warrior Priest's Hammer of Sigmar. He does have the Grand Shield of Faith and AoE 22% damage resist. And Soulfire, which doesn't really do much. It's a great magic resist. It does a little bit of damage, but it's pretty cool. I do like it for a niche sort of situations. And then, of course, a bound banishment spell. So all in all, I think he's very solid for infantry support. Alongside him, we do have an Amber Wizard, Lore of Beasts, of course. He is pretty heavily kitted out, more so than I would normally do. You can see he does have the Blast, which I think is okay for how cheap it is. Power Stone to improve our power reserves. Wild Heart. And then you can see we actually have a lot of spells. I brought, in case my opponent went with heavy duty infantry, I brought Pan's Impenetrable Belt for that physical resist, as well as Curse of Honorar for the melee attack debuff. And then if my opponent decided to go with light infantry, we have Flock of Doom and Wisdom's Wild Form to provide armor buffs as well as just damage against those squishy units. Now the main infantry core here is actually all Greatswords, and this is because we're up against Beastmen on Tower of Hoeth here. So Greatswords are actually a really good pick against Bestigors and Beastmen in general, even though it might not seem like it because Bestigors are really strong. Despite everything, even roided up with their Primal Fury, Bestigors, except for charge bonus and HP pool, don't have better stats than vanilla Greatswords. These guys are slightly chevroned up, but even if they weren't, their base melee defense is still higher than a Bestigor's. Their armor is almost the same and will be the same with the patch. Their melee attack, although not looking that good, is boosted by 9 bonusers infantry, so it's actually better, as is their weapon strength. So really, Greatswords can trade incredibly well with Bestigors, that very attriciously, and especially with these sort of buffs. So I've got a front line of 6 Greatswords. They can trash basically any infantry my opponent brings, backed by 2 Free Company Militia to provide some anti-large, essentially, or anti-monstrous shooting. 2 Spearmen in the back, and then the Hammer, which is providing additional anti-large support, sniping away at the Minotaurs all right off the bat. I think that in retrospect, honestly, I should swap the Greatsword out for Spearmen, or for 3 units of Spearmen to provide more peripheral support, but you know what, it's an okay build. And you can see here, we're actually pulling back a tiny bit to prevent the Eye of Moor's Leap from getting shots. My opponent did go with an interesting build, centered on the Eye of Moor's Leap. No magic for him. On the flank here, he's got his only mobility, so 3 Chaos Warhounds, who are sneaking through the woods. And then his main force here, you can see already a few Bestigors got clipped by the cannon. But his front line is composed of Black Orange Ravagers as well as Goreherd, both of whom are stalked at this moment, sneaking up on me. And these guys, of course, would do well against squishy infantry, like Spearmen, like Free Company Militia, but against Greatswords, they'll do pretty terrible. They're backed by 2 or 3 units of Bestigors, which, as we discussed, will trade pretty atrociously with Greatswords. They will, I do believe, beat them in a straight-up fight, but it's not anywhere near a sort of decisive insta-win. So definitely going to be a little bit of rough stuff. Then we got Morgr, of course, with his Chaos Spawn summons. You can see a meaty connection here on my pro Greatswords. Look at that. Well, they've been ground to paste by that rock. So sad. But You can see the Minotaurs getting chipped away at. 3 units of Bestigors and a Gorbel providing some anti-large AP. Plus die of Morsley, of course. One of the things I do think is missing here is a good counter to heavy cav, but regardless, doesn't matter in this situation against my composition. My opponent there does chip away at the Hammer of Witches, splattering some of the crew, but they immediately remount and begin firing back at the Minotaurs, trying to bring them down, and Volkmar just piles through the Gore Herd. With his high mass and impact damage, he does pretty well there, and you can see these Minotaurs as they blob, they get clocked by that Hammer of Witches, and lose, I think, 3 models in a single volley there. In the meantime, you can see the Greatswords clambering in, fighting against the Bestigors. You can see they're already trading really well. The HP pools are already even. I think I got the charge off and my opponent didn't. And the end result is these Bestigors are not going to be able to win even against this lone unit of Greatswords. But big mistake on my part committing the Greatswords here, but I should have kept them in reserve. There was no reason to commit them there. Banishment does go off for doing very little. All the buffs here in the center, though, are going to ensure that the fight goes very heavily in my favor. These Greatswords are just going to dominate. In the meantime, the cannon continues pounding away, melting those units. Here in the pits, the Blackhorn's Ravagers were getting decimated, but once the Bestigors throw in, especially because they've got the benefit of their charge bonus, they'll do pretty well. But you can see I do cast a Pan's Impenetrable Belt, granting these guys plus 22% physical resist, which will make them that much tankier against the Bestigors, make them hold out a little longer. It does reduce the effective damage from the Bestigors by a good bit, so that's really solid there. In the meantime, my opponent pulls his Hounds out, so a bit of his trump card here, and I don't have the forces to respond. I did see the Hounds, but the Spearmen are too slow. The Free Company Militia's not... I don't turn them around to go engage in melee fast enough. And although I ordered the crew to dismount and run, it's really too little too late, as the Hounds do snag him there. However, Volkmar is having an absolute field day. You can see poor Morgr here getting chopped and sliced and diced. Over here, the Greatswords with Pan's Impenetrable Belt, which lasts for a very long time. I think it's like 44 seconds or something. Doing an absolutely stellar job against 3 units of infantry, very heavily outnumbered. And all these Greatswords just won the front line so decisively that my opponent has basically no troops left. Flock of Doom wrecking these Hounds. My opponent's essentially down to the Cygor, a handful of Bestigors over there, and his summons. Plus, I guess Hounds. Hounds don't matter too much, they're kind of crap. They do slaughter my crew here, but the crew is trying to pull back through its infantry line, doing an okay job. They end up losing most of their models, which is unfortunate, because my opponent was very aggressively pathing after them. But nonetheless, they do their best, and there will be enough of them there to reman the guns later. Anytime you can see over here in the pits, the Wizard does cast the Curse of Anrar, evening this fight again. And the 3rd unit of Greatswords has joined the fray at this point, hitting these Bestigors in the rear, negating what little melee defense they have, and these guys are really going to start suffering very, very badly. Unfortunately, here with the artillery fire, my opponents are actually able to rout 3 units of infantry with these Hounds. And his Chaos Spawn Summon actually routed my Free Company, so things looking a little rough, but Morgr himself getting dumpstered by a bunch of Greatswords. He's not very good against units like this. Although he does apply poison, he doesn't have armor, he doesn't have much survivability against them, and he's just not that good. He doesn't do a lot of damage to him either, because they've got a lot of armor. Over here, Minotaurs actually get beaten by Greatswords because they're so beaten up. And in the meantime, yeah, my opponent's army is, although the balance of power is still very even, we've still got a long ways to go in this game. The game is essentially decided, and that's not to be cocky or anything. The game is essentially over. A lot of my opponent's balance of power is propped up by the fact that 1, Beastmen are right now have a ridiculously broken balance of power, but 2, these Chaos Spawn that got summoned. If you watch some other YouTubers, I do believe Dolph Blaze was referencing the issue. Beastmen get an exceedingly good balance of power, and I really don't know why. I don't know if that's going to be fixed with the patch. Hopefully we'll find out tomorrow. But regardless, you can see the Greatsword slaughtering Morgr, a nice little blast going in and destroying the Gore Herd. And as you can see, my opponent's Bestigors at this point completely routed. A few rocks coming in, but really it's too little too late. Most of the Bestigors are gone. The Greatswords here hacking and slashing through another unit of Bestigors, winning pretty decisively, up to 58 kills, which is really not bad. These guys are no pushovers against these sorts of troops. And although my opponent is pulling troops in constantly, I'm able to pull, you can see Volkmar over here, hitting the Gorbel, and at this point it's kind of wrap up. I'm sending all my Greatswords over across the map to deal with the Eye of Morrsleep. I have a single unit of Greatswords chasing some Hounds here, but keep trying to remount the gun, but it's really not happening. This Eye of Morrsleep continuously actually just shuts them down because their morale is so low. That's a little unfortunate, but regardless, we are holding our own with the buffs. The poor Gorbel here just doesn't stand a chance with the Grand Hammer of Sigmar going down. He doesn't have the melee defense to hold here. It's pretty pitiful, and Morgr there getting run over by Volkmar, who of course is fire damage, getting a bonus for poor Morgr. Greatswords chopping their way through the poor Gorbel, and his pitiful 32 melee defense. Even without any buffs, the Greatswords would still do really well against the Gorbel. And yeah, at this point, it's basically we're going to fast forward things. You can see the infantry mobs getting shattered. My Ember Wizard actually messes up those best scores enough to shatter them. And now we throw him into the Cygor. I was hoping to actually make my opponent start running away with the Iron Morsley, but my opponent stands and fights, which means the Greatswords will be able to trickle in. On the periphery, I'm using my Free Company and Spears to muck down these Bestigors that my opponent didn't notice. Honestly, I should have held off for a bit and just let my Free Company keep shooting. But it's okay. Cannon Crew comes back, and Morgar and Co. are having a terrible time. The Chaos Spawn comes down. I'm not entirely sure what unit they wiped out. Maybe a unit of Greatswords in there. I wasn't really paying the greatest attention. But the Gorbel does actually go down to Volkmar. You can see the Filthy Beast has been cleansed from the field. And the Greatswords at this point are just holding their own. With their decent armor, they'll hold okay and mow through Morgar and his spawn here, especially with Volkmar's support, of course. In the back line, you can see the Emperor Wizard does get routed. He's terrified by the Cygor, but it doesn't really matter. Cygor doesn't have good melee defense. He's going to get chopped up by this Greatswords. You can see all of them here surrounding it. I would not want to be these poor guys. I really wouldn't want to be there against the Cygor. But you can see them just taking it to Pound Town. Really putting the hurt down on this guy. And you can see it's definitely getting melted. Picks up I think it picked up a guy that just squished him. It's pretty brutal stuff. But regardless, we will throw things into fast forward as my opponent's army simply shatters and we beat down the last few Chaos Spawn. So regardless, a fun game. We will have another one right after. This is, of course, pre-patch. Still, Empire Infantry is somewhat competitive, and even pre-patch. And before we hop on over to the second video, or second battle, I do want to mention that even now, pre-patch, Empire Infantry is a lot better than people give it credit for. Granted, Halberdiers are in a weak spot, which is hopefully fixed with the patch. Empire Greatswords are a tad pricey for what they do. Empire State Troops obviously aren't the greatest, and Flagellants are a little weak in some ways for their cost. But you know what? Empire Infantry, all in all, if you balance them out against every other faction's infantry, is pretty competitive. People often complain that Empire Infantry can't hold its own, but you actually do a comparison, and Empire is able to take on both undead armies, both Tomb Kings and Vampire counts. It's able to take on Lizardmen, Wood Elves, Bretonnia, Norskins, Skaven, and Beastmen, all in a pretty straight up sort of melee combat. It's not necessarily super weak. It can actually compete. Greatswords are not that terrible. Obviously, other factions like Chaos, High Elves, Dark Elves have much stronger infantry, and you can't really compete there. But especially against these factions, granted, Empire doesn't have the monstrous troops to support them, but on the flip side, Empire has a lot of magic selection and a lot of shooting to compensate. So Empire is not in a bad position, I think, infantry-wise. So really, hopefully, with the patch, it's going to be stronger. That's hopefully what the video will show, how Empire can do well, but definitely don't underestimate the power of units like Greatswords. In the Beastmen matchup, for example, they're very competitive. Here I went very heavy with 6 Greatswords. In practice, you can bring, like, in normal games where you're not trying to be overkill, you can bring like 4 or 5 and still be very decent. So without further ado, guys, let's hop on over to the next one and see how things are after the patch. So here we are on the Tomb of the Shifting Sands after the patch has already hit, and we are playing as Empire this time around against the Tomb Kings. And as you can see, the force we are fielding is very much a whole bunch of the units that were recently buffed. Halberdiers, of course, with their new and improved leadership. Greatswords, who of course were a little bit cheaper now. Of course, the Halberdiers do have their expert charge defense as well. And then a whole sort of plethora of supporting units. We do have our Demigryph Knights, we do have a Warrior Priest in here, and I've actually brought the Warrior Priest on a horse, figuring that rather than bring him with infantry formation, because we'll probably be able to win there no matter what, I'll bring him with the Demigryphs, try to get the max amount of damage out of my cavalry contingent. And so the Warrior Priest is coming in. He's got his Shield of Faith, which is an AoE damage resistance, and then he's got the Hammer of Sigmar, which on a 60-second cooldown, it's a 25-second plus 26 melee attack, so it's really solid. He also does have Benediction, providing +8 leadership, which does stack with Karl Franz over here. Karl does have the Reichland Runefang, of course, which is an additional plus 26 melee attack. He's got the Galmaraz, of course, for himself, Stand Your Ground, and the new and improved Hold the Line, providing +5 melee defense to all these Demigryph Knights, making them a much more potent force in close quarters. So basically, against the Tomb Kings, this was kind of my dedicated anti-large force, ready to hunt down any sort of Necrosphinxes, Cetra, Archon, whatever my opponent might bring. These guys can hunt it down pretty effectively. I did not actually bring the fire standard on the Warrior Priest. You might be wondering why, since most Tomb King units are vulnerable to fire. But one of the things I was slightly worried about was that my opponent could bring the Sphinx of Usef, which does have fire resistance, and I didn't want my... And since these guys were supposed to be kind of the dedicated anti-large squad, I didn't want them getting caught up in that. With unable to do great damage. On the periphery, we do have 2 Empire Knights ready to shut down enemy archers. I kind of figured if my opponent goes with an infantry-heavy build with a bunch of archers, which is pretty common against Empire, I need something to shut them down so they don't slaughter my halberdiers. So 2 Empire Knights providing that support. 2 Greatswords to chop through the infantry a little more efficiently. Single unit of Spearmen just to soak up damage and be a buffer. And then a Celestial Wizard over here, mounted on a horse, providing 3 buffs and debuffs. He has, or damage spells. He's got Wind Blast to melt squishy infantry and archers, Curse of the Midnight Wind for that armor and melee attack debuff, Harmonic Convergence, and then Power Stone. So a whole bunch of buffs, good old support tool, and yeah, that's basically it for the build. Oh, and Silver Bullets here provides additional AP support. For my opponent's build, a very shooting-heavy, somewhat trollish, and definitely very annoying build, but definitely sacrificing elsewhere to make it happen. You can see he's got a bunch of artillery. He's got Grandpa Katep here on his Roomba, rolling around. He's got, obviously, terrible melee stats and survivability, but, well, not the worst. He's got 80 armor, but he does have a lot of spells. He's got, actually, I think he has most, if not all of his spells. Yeah, he's actually got all of his spells. I don't know why, once again, but people do sometimes do that. He's got Sandstorm, his Bound Vortex, Arcane Conduit, and he does have this Covenant of Power from being on the Casket of Souls, which does grant him additional winds of magic. You can see me, being the coward I am, immediately start posturing my infantry to take the brunt of the shooting and hide my cavalry behind the hill because I have no intention of getting shot to death by a whole bunch of annoying monsters shooting. So my opponent did bring the Chosen of the Gods here. He did bring the Ushabti Greatbows, so 2 very powerful AP shooting units. He also does have a Bone Giant, which is an absolute nightmare to face with cavalry. It is considered one of the best counters to Bretonnia right now for the Tomb Kings, and it's a pretty decent counter to the Empire as well. So you can see already the Casket of Souls firing away at my poor halberdiers there, but shortly followed by Ushabti fire. But these guys are brave Empire soldiers. They've got that new buff to leadership, so they're not going to break right away, especially with the support from the Wizard. For his front line, my opponent is going pretty darn cheap. He's got a mix of Skeleton Spears, some Hakaran Warriors, and I do believe 2 Tomb Guard in there. He's got 2 Tomb Guards, so he kind of overloaded one flank, hoping to get advantage there. This will do okay against the sort of cheap Empire infantry line, but honestly, with the new and improved halberdiers, I think we might be able to get a good trade. Unfortunately, standing still and soaking up their charge is probably not going to happen here, simply because we can't afford to stand and get shot to death by Chosen of the Gods. So we need to zone them away, and we're probably going to be pushing right in. Finally, my opponent does have a Kemrian War Sphinx, which I think, forget to mention, though you guys obviously saw it probably. Look at this beautiful little kitty. Look at him. So cute. But, of course, it's a pretty powerful anti-infantry tool. So my opponent has some good counters to cavalry with all this shooting, and he's got some decent counters against infantry with just, once again, the shooting, but the War Sphinx, some Necron Warriors, that sort of stuff. Regardless, he does focus my spears out for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. You can see the Bone Giant there taking out, I do believe, 4 knights in a single shot. So very, very potent stuff. But I am able to kind of worm my way around, and despite taking this monstrous fire coming in, my infantry will now be able to engage the Skeleton Spears. They're going to be able to engage all along the front line, and they should be able to win in most of these situations. Unfortunately, my knights have a terrible time. You can see they've already lost 20 models, I think, or 19 models there, and most of their HP, so they're in a disastrous position right now. But they were kind of a sacrificial tool, and I just need them to do a little bit of work. Over here, they do charge Skeleton Spears just to tie them down, buy some time for my infantry. You can see I actually put the Warrior Priest in there, though that was not intended, but I want to tie these Spearmen down, prevent them from helping as the Goon Squad rolls around the flank. You can see Carl immediately going after that Bone Giant. The Silver Bullets are opening up on the Ushabti Greatbows, and my opponent is not pulling them back because he's so focused on taking out the Empire Knights. And the Demigryphs are going after Grandpa Katep, who is in for a world of hurt. He did cast Nervous Incantation of Protection on himself to sort of ward this attack off, but with his terrible melee defense, with his irrelevant armor here, and the fact that he is large, he's going to start taking a nasty beating, and despite casting his Incantation of Vengeance here, all that stuff, the Demigryphs are in. They're not going to let him go, and they're going to beat the snot out of him. Unfortunately, Carl not having the best of times here against the Bone Giant. He is shutting him down, but Carl just doesn't do that much damage. He has been hit by the Hammer of Sigmar because he was there right as the priest procced it. But unfortunately, now he's just beating away at the Bone Giant. And the Bone Giant has so much HP that it would take him forever. So shortly we're actually going to shift target. You can see over here the Demigryph Knights taking a nasty beating, but I do get the Empire Knights on the Chosen of the Gods, and I'm tying them down, denying them from shooting. And over here you can see Karl Franz is actually going to turn around, go help his brave Demigryphs, and charge in on Grand Katep. He's going to pop all his buffs. You can see Stand Your Ground, Reichland Runefang buffing these guys up. He's also got the Golem Raz, and poor Katep is in for a world of hurt. You can see he's just losing hundreds of HP per hit. Karl hitting for 600 right now. It's just monstrous. In the front line, my Empire Knights cycle charging these Skeleton Warriors, while over here you can see things are going really well. I do cast a Curse of the Midnight Wind and a nice little Wind Blast, melting a lot of these squishy units, and the rain of Silver Bullet Fire continues withering down these Ushabti Greatbows, and although they are able to force off those Empire Knights, they've taken monstrous casualties. And my infantry, of course, is just not breaking. The halberdiers, hit by Sandstorm here, still holding their ground. Of course, those courageous state troops, as always, just performing so well here. And you can see my opponent's spearmen actually there getting wiped by his own Sandstorm, though the halberds do take a bit of a beating in turn. Granted, some of the front line is not doing too great over there. We're definitely not holding as well. The Empire Knights here kind of bogged down against these annoying Skeleton Spears, but, you know, Silver Bullet's still wailing away, melting those Chosen of the Gods, and Katep has gone down over here to Karl Franz. You can see over there the broken Casket of Souls and poor Grandpa over there just laying in the sand. And now we are hunting for the Camarine Warsphinx. It did manage to tear out the Demigryphs, but they are back with a vengeance, riding into battle here, diving in, heedless of the monstrous creature here, and doing some monstrous work here against the Camarine Warsphinx, especially with Karl in tow. You guys are doing a lot of work. Now, my opponent does get the Bone Giant in there, trying to block these guys off. But I'm pathing very aggressively up to the Camarine Warsphinx, trying to shut it down. My opponent is trying to get it in with his infantry to protect it. You can see the Warrior Priest here definitely providing great support to this front line, doing a good job of beating down those Tomb Guard and taking one for the team. Over here, my opponent does get his Ushabti summon, but we deny it with our Empire Knights and pulling the Halberdiers back while leaving the Great Swords to win against the Tomb Guard. And you can see these Ushabti aren't going to do very much. The Silver Bullets lost a few models. They lost like 10 models, but they're able to reposition and start melting Camarine Warsphinx. Unfortunately, you can see the Bone Giant is back in action because we were so busy chasing off the Camarine Warsphinx, and is going to be able to do some damage to this blob here. But too little, too late with the Celestial Wizard in there. Of course, Ushabti are not very good against infantry against large. It's getting melted. The Camarine Warsphinx won't last too much longer, not against halberds. And at this point, my opponent's army is basically falling apart. He's basically down to this Bone Giant. The Demigryphs over there hunting down the Ushabti. And the front line is basically gone. So, very potent stuff from the Empire. You can see 53 kills on the Celestial Wizard. His Wind Blast is just so potent. And against these sorts of blobs of squishy infantry is just really, really good. Definitely worth bringing against the Tomb Kings, in my opinion, if you're bringing a Lord of Heaven's Caster. As for the front line, Halberds did a pretty respectable job. They were taking a pounding from the artillery and from the archers and or the Chosen of the Gods who shot the great bows. And nonetheless, they held their ground. They dispatched a whole bunch of monsters. They helped dispatch the Ushabti summon. They held their ground against all these units. And we're just doing a really champion job up there. It's helping out the Great Swords win in the front line. Spears, they got decimated. There's not much to say there. Empire Knights didn't do too great of a job. And honestly, these guys were killing spears. These guys basically just got annihilated by Ushabti fire, but you know, they were soaking up hits for the team, and the Demigryph Knights were just monsters, helping tear through the Katep there, the Camarine Warsphinx, and basically just shutting down the most important units. Karl, not a bad choice here, despite not lack of healing. Obviously, he still does well. I think he's obviously better off with Lore of Life, but nonetheless, I do think that you don't have to it's not mandatory to bring Lore of Life with Karl to make him work. And honestly, against Tomb Kings, who tend to kind of wreck your cavalry, which you'd otherwise be supporting with which each shot basically killing models to your cavalry. I don't really think it's as worthwhile to bring a Lore of Life against them necessarily. It's just my 2 cents there. Also, pleased with the Warrior Priest. Now, granted, he's a little pricey, even stripped down like he was here. I think he only had Benediction in his two of his abilities. He does cost close to 1,000 on a horse. He's pretty expensive, but he was doing great work, providing support, tying down those spears and Tomb Guard, and helping the Knights just perform so much better. So I really do enjoy him. I think he's pretty cool. And yeah, definitely the improvements to Empire have made their infantry, I think, a lot more competitive. Great game to my opponent, Dib. Great game to my prior opponent as well. I do hope you guys enjoyed this before and after comparison. Obviously, the matchups were not the same. The compositions were not the same, but I did want to sort of see how things were before and see how units were performing after. So regardless, great game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, as usual, don't hesitate to ask. I'm always willing to answer. And if you guys have any comments, any way I could improve, be sure to mention, or any with video requests, anything like that, be sure to mention it, and I'll do my best to respond. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.